Hello everyone and welcome to Inside the Mind of Sport. In this last episode of 2020, I will look at whether Jose Mourinho is a sore loser, why Jürgen Klopp can get away with more than Mourinho, and what Julia Görges and Paula Findley have in common. If you enjoy listening to this podcast, please share it with one of your friends. That way, it can keep growing and I can keep doing what I like. Now, without further ado, let's get inside the mind of sport. The first two stories for this episode come from the English Premier League, where last week two of the big six teams squared off against each other. Liverpool and Tottenham played for the lead in the league, and although the game was won by Liverpool in the dying minutes of the game with a spectacular header, the main story of this game was actually about the managers, Tottenham's Jose Mourinho and Liverpool's Jürgen Klopp. After the game, Mourinho claimed, mildly annoyed, that the best team had lost. But more than that, he actually attacked Klopp by saying that if he would behave like Klopp does on the touchline, he would be sent off the pitch. This behavior isn't that surprising for Mourinho. He is known for his arguing with colleagues, referees, the media, and even his own players. He is a manager that doesn't take anyone questioning him, his beliefs, his way of training, the results, and will defend his team to the end. But mostly, he'll defend himself to the end. Some people just say that he's not a very nice person. If you listen to certain media outlets, they tend to be quite critical on him as a person, although quite a few of these same outlets do respect him as a manager, mostly because of his tactical insights and what he has achieved with clubs like Real Madrid and FC Porto and Inter Milan in the past. But there's also a group of people that see this behavior of attacking, putting all the spotlight on himself, constantly being the talking point, as a managerial strategy to keep his players out of that spotlight, to keep them out of the tabloids. He directs all of attention and all the critique towards himself, so that attention and critique won't be geared towards his players, his staff, whoever. And some people say that this is a strategy to allow these athletes to perform at their highest level and solely focus on what they're doing on the pitch and not have to focus on the media and all those kinds of things. Well, whichever it is, whether it's just him being a bit of a nasty person or whether it's a very conscious choice to behave this way to help his athletes, I think there are two interesting psychological things that are on display here. And the first one is Jose Mourinho a sore loser? Now, as I mentioned, he isn't really known for being very honorable in defeat. He will point out many different things that go wrong, from the opposing manager to the referee to the pitch to the schedule. It doesn't matter. He will find something to blame the loss on. But to me, that seems a little bit weird because for somebody who functions this well for so long at the highest level of soccer, it seems a little weird that he wouldn't have some kind of strategy to cope with a defeat. That there isn't some way that he can control himself and be able to keep doing his job without feeling like he just explodes every time something goes wrong. Maybe to understand someone's behavior surrounding winning and losing, we need to look at what is called the attribution theory. What this theory says is that when we succeed, whether that is in sports, in life, in work, whatever, we tend to attribute that success to our own internal actions, or in other words, the things that we control. If you win, it's because you played so well. If you win, if you get that promotion, it's because you worked so hard for it. If you buy a new house, it's because you deserve it. You did that. You worked. You succeeded. On the other hand, however, when we fail, or in sport, that often means losing, people tend to attribute that to external factors. We lost because of the weather. We lost because of the referee. We lost because the opponent cheated. I didn't get that promotion because the system is rigged. This might seem as a very arrogant thing to do, right? Everything that doesn't go my way is everyone else's fault, and everything that does go my way is my own doing. But the reason behind it is that our brains are trying to protect its own feeling of self-worth, which is in turn vital for motivating us to go about and do the things that we need to do in everyday life. When somebody doesn't have any self-worth, they tend to stop doing things altogether. They believe that they will never be successful. They stop really trying to achieve certain things. So we shouldn't mistake people attributing failures or losses to external factors with thinking that they are the best thing that has ever happened in the history of the world. Let's take a moment and get back to Jose Mourinho and his comments after the Tottenham versus Liverpool game. Why does he blame external factors so much after this loss? Now, I believe that this has to do with the large part of his self-worth attached to him being a soccer manager. But not only that, he's the type of manager that takes responsibility for everything that happens. If he wins, it's because of his magnificent tactical plan. The other side of that is that if you believe that and if you work in that way, if you lose, it's also your fault. And to protect his self-worth, his brain blames external factors really quickly and really strongly to make sure that he can protect his self-worth. I think if we ask Jose Mourinho, what are you? He will probably say a football manager. So when he loses, there's a genuine and a big threat to his self-worth, and it is attacked strongly, so he needs to defend it. But not only that, because in this particular case, the opponent matters as well. You see, the opponent's manager, Jürgen Klopp, is considered to be in the same elite level or elite league of managers. Right? We talk about top managers, the ones that manage the biggest teams, the ones that are the most successful. You can think in soccer about Jürgen Klopp, Jose Mourinho, Pep Guardiola, Bill Belichick in football, or in basketball, Phil Jackson and Doc Rivers. They're all part of this elite level of coaches. So for Mourinho, losing to Klopp attacks his self-worth even more because he lost to somebody that is supposed to be just as good as he is. So to me, when Mourinho says, if I would behave like Klopp does on the touchline, I would be sent off. I think what he really says is, if I was allowed to do what he does, we would have won. He is blaming an external factor for the loss in order to protect his self-worth. Next time you look at a coach blaming external factors after a loss, ask yourself whether that is maybe what they really think made the team lose, or whether they're simply protecting their own self-worth. There's another interesting psychological thing that comes out of this game. Let's assume that Mourinho is right, and that Klopp is allowed to do more on the touchline, to behave in a way on the touchline that if Mourinho would do it would not be accepted. Why would that be? Why would there be such a difference between the way the two managers that are both considered very successful and very highly rated managers are treated? In episode 2 of Inside the Mind of Sport, I talked about unconscious bias, and that we all have these unconscious biases within us. And I think this is another case of an unconscious bias. So if you haven't listened to that episode, basically what this means is that we have a subconscious part of our brain that can influence our behavior without us realizing it. And what is within this subconscious brain is mostly to do with expectations. We attach certain meaning and certain values to people's behavior because we have a subconscious bias about what we expect them to do. In this case, Klopp is known as a very civilized, well-spoken, respectful manager who is loved by his athletes, his staff, the entire club, the media. He's loved by everyone. While on the other hand, Mourinho is known as a shouting, disrespectful manager to not only the media but also his staff and his players, and there's this idea that nobody likes him. So let's say that both managers do something on the touchline that is borderline within the rules. It's not blatantly not allowed, but it's probably outside of the rules. In last week's match, this was grabbing the fourth official by the arm. If it is Klopp that is doing this, there's an unconscious part of the referee's brain that says, I'm sure that he didn't mean it that way. He's normally such a nice person. He probably just got caught in his emotions for a moment. I'm sure that if he reflects on it, he'll realize that he's made a mistake. I don't think there's a need to punish him for it. However, when Mourinho does it, the unconscious brain says, oh, here goes Mourinho again, shouting and complaining like a small child to get his way. I must make sure to not let him get away with this. I should book him. The unconscious part of our brains can really change how we perceive certain behavior. Whether we think it's threatening or not, whether we think it is meant to be nice, endearing, or aggressive. Trying to take that part away is really difficult. But what referees need to do in every single moment is try and see things objectively. Is a behavior within or not within the rules? And let go of why they think somebody does it. That way, I think Mourinho and Klopp can be treated in the same way. The third story of today's episode is actually two different stories that I read separately and only later realized, wait, I think these are related. I think there's a similar underlying thing that is going on here. The first one surrounds Julia Görges, the 32-year-old German who shocked the tennis world this week by suddenly and unexpectedly announcing her retirement. Being in lockdown due to COVID made her realize that there is way more in life than just tennis. And she said, it just showed me how nice life can be away from tennis. If you just have it for 2 or 3 weeks, like in the off season, retirement never comes to your mind. But if you have stayed away from the tour for 5 to 6 months, it just opens up a whole different new chapter. And so she decided to quit the tour. After she quit and went into retirement, she said, I can feel it now on my body. It's less tension, less pain, because the mental stress, which affects your body and affects your mind a lot, this has gone away. Now, on the other hand of this story, there's Canadian triathlete Paula Findley, the 31-year-old making headlines this week by winning the Professional Triathlon Organization Championships in Daytona, Florida. Her story is unique because 8 years ago, at the 2012 Olympics, she had one of the worst days in her sporting career. She was set to win a medal before coming into the Olympics, but because of an injury, she finished last in the race. About that race, she said, I feel terrible. I had nothing. It's the Olympic Games, and it's my first time here, and it's overwhelming. I finished. I really wanted to stop. It was a huge mental struggle just to get to the finish line. But her story doesn't stop there. After the 2012 Olympics, she started preparing for the 2016 Rio Olympics. But because of political reasons, she wasn't selected to the squad for the 2016 Olympics. Officially, it was because she didn't meet the requirements set by Triathlon Canada. But Findley says it has more to do with the fact that she broke ties with Triathlon Canada in the years leading up to those Olympics. Now, let's get back to 2020. After her win at Daytona, she said, "I am pretty good at forging ahead, and that's why I'm still racing. Even right after the Olympics in London, I was ready to keep racing. I hadn't quit the sport. I have been racing. Never big enough to get attention from the media. It appears I've been gone, but I have been racing." So, what do these two stories have in mind? And for me, it's the power of habits. In the case of Paula Findley, pushing her to keep going with her sport, even though she's out of the spotlights, out of grace with Triathlon Canada. But she keeps doing what she does. But on the other hand, for Julia Görges, breaking a habit meant that she realized there was something more in life. These stories are similar because habits have both a good and a bad power. What habits do is they make us do activities without thinking about why we're doing them. A habit is something you do just because that's what you do. It is natural. It is, in your mind, logical. Even though I know why I brush my teeth every night, I don't think about it. I don't think, I should brush my teeth, otherwise that will be bad for my dental health. Brushing your teeth is a habit. You do it because that's what you do. Habits will not be questioned while you are in them. And therefore it is really extremely difficult to change your habits while you're still doing them. In the case of Paula Findley, she had many opportunities, many points in her career where she could have said, you know what, this habit of doing triathlon is not worth it anymore. But she never got out of the habit. After the 2012 Olympics, she kept going. And she kept going over and over despite all the setbacks she had in her career. Now, that's paying off for her. So, if you ask her, was it good that you stayed within the habit and kept going? She probably says, yeah, you know what? I'm happy I kept going. On the other hand, the negative side of habits is that it can also pushes us to do things that when we reflect on them later, we realize we didn't want to do it. I am sure that many of us have realized that we spend too much time on our phones and have wanted to change that behavior. Yet, it is so hard to break that habit that very often after 1 or 2 days, we're back to what we were doing before. Julia Görges is in this category of people with habits. She just kept going and kept playing tennis because that's what she was doing. She mentions that she would only be home for 2 weeks in the off season, and that time wasn't long enough for her to reflect on what she was doing. So by the time there was any thought about, is this really what I want to be doing? She was already back on the tour doing what she had been doing for so many years. What is interesting about a habit is that it can both help us to continue doing good behavior and force us to continue doing bad behavior. So think about it. Which habits do you have? Which habits are really making you do things every single day? And then think about it. Are these habits that I want to keep doing, that I want to keep, that I want to continue, that are helping me be successful? Very often, the end of the year is the moment when we reflect on our habits. We have 2 weeks of vacation. We can take a moment and step back from the habit of our work, the habit of whatever we're doing, and think about, is this really what I want to do? When you're doing this year, I want you to think about Julia Görges and Paula Findley. Identify which of your habits are Paula Findley's. The ones that you want to keep doing because you know in the end it's going to give you success and satisfaction. And which of your habits are Julia Görges's? The ones that, upon reflection, we realize you've been doing for a while, but you should stop. I think we should all try to be a combination of Julia and Paula. Get rid of the habits we don't want and keep the habits we do. That way, we will be most happy and successful. Thank you for listening to this episode of Inside the Mind of Sport. Like I said, this was the last one of 2020. If you did enjoy the podcast, please share it with your friends. Put it on your Facebook or your Instagram saying, I enjoyed listening to this. Rate the podcast on iTunes if that's where you're listening. And I wish everyone happy holidays and a prosperous 2021.